Hi, this is Dr. Reese. I want to review the PowerPoint presentation template for the title pawn presentation. On the first slide, which you're looking at now, you need to put the first name and the last name of all of the members of the group. Please note, I've had this in red font. When you turn in your presentation, the final version, this should be in black font. So put the first name and the last name of everyone in your group. All right, there's nothing to do on slide number 2. The location of title pawn is there. You may just want to verify that that location is still there. Slide 3, there's an overview of the company. In your audio narration, you should provide a brief overview of the Title Max title pawn company. 2, you should provide a brief description of the transaction you propose to do. I suggest that you pawn the title for a 2018 Toyota Camry. Again, I suggest you pawn the title for a 2018 Toyota Camry. 2, what's the collateral? You need to figure out what the value of the collateral is. You're going to determine the value of the collateral by going to Kelley Blue Book online or some alternative or comparable site and determining what the resale value of the car would be to a dealer. Finally, number 3, you're going to summarize the terms of the contract that you'd have with the title pawn company. 4, you're going to outline the amount and timing of all the fees associated with getting this title pawn loan. Slide 4, you're going to want to provide a summary of the benefits of the transaction to the customer. And then you're also going to want to identify any state and or federal regulators responsible for monitoring this particular activity. So again, you want to identify any state or federal regulators who would monitor the provision of this service. Slide 5, you're going to provide a description of the transaction. Again, you provide an overview of the transaction, the amount of money that the title company will lend you, that's the amount borrowed. You're going to describe the collateral. And again, I suggest that you pawn the title for a 2018 Toyota Camry. Why? Because this is an incredibly popular car, and so it should have a relatively high resale value because there are so many of them around. So that's why I'm suggesting it be a 2018 Toyota Camry. You're going to find the value of the Camry by going to kelleybluebook.com or some other comparable car site. So now again, when you enter this information in, you're going to change the color of the font from red to black. I put this in red here so you know this is information you need to enter. This is information you need to enter. So now you're going to provide a summary of the major terms of the transaction, the length of the transactions, fees to be charged, collateral, description of the collateral, value of the collateral. Now, number 4, you want to identify the jurisdiction. In other words, if you and the lender have some sort of legal dispute, where would that have to be adjudicated? On the lender's website or in their contract, they will indicate where any legal disputes have to be adjudicated. They'll indicate an actual place. It may be the state of Kentucky or the state of Michigan, and that'll also indicate that the laws of that state apply when trying to determine if there's any legal cause of action. Last but not least, you're going to determine what, if any, penalties the customer has to pay if there's some default or failure to comply with the contract. I would suggest as a starting date for your transaction, August 1st, and an ending date for your transaction, September 30. So in other words, you'd have your loan outstanding for 2 months. Typically, title loans are outstanding for a month. But what I suggest for this purposes is that you have your loan outstanding for 2 months, start August 1st and end September 30th. You're going to then outline all of the fees and charges required to secure this loan. On slide 9, And slide 10, there are copies of this little table for capturing fees and amounts and dates. You want to list them sequentially there. I don't think you'll need more than these 3 slides to memorialize all of the fees, do them in chronological order. But if so, you can copy slide 10 and make an additional slide if there's more fees. But in this instance, you won't need to do that. All right, benefits of the transaction. First of all, you want to outline how long it took you to get the loan. 2, want to identify what documentation was required to be submitted to the lender to obtain the loan. And 3, you want to describe that the process was convenient, meaning was it speedy and not cumbersome. Here on this slide, you see red font. That means data you need to enter or information you need to enter. Once you've entered it, change the color of the font from red to black. Now, if there's some other benefits associated with the transaction, you should describe that as well on slide 12. On slide 13, we want to list any federal, state, or local regulators who are responsible for monitoring or regulating this activity. Again, on slide 13, we want to identify, list federal, state, and local regulators. Again, once you list them, change the font color from red to black. On slide 14, you'll list the federal regulators and briefly explain what the regulators require of Title Max. If there's a state regulator or regulators, we're going to list them. Again, you will explain what these state regulators require of Title Max. If there's a local regulator, then again, you'll list the local regulator or regulators and explain what the regulators require of Title Max. As you are reviewing the federal, state, and local regulators, you may want to keep in mind what the objectives of bank regulation might be. There are 2 main objectives or goals of bank regulation. So you may want to keep those in mind. And you also want to keep in mind what mechanisms that the regulatory provisions employ. There are 5 basic kind of mechanics that are employed by bank regulation. And so you may want to think about which of these mechanics are being deployed as you look at the bank regulation to which this activity is subjected. Last but not least, you should identify and list any personal insights you had as a result of completing this project. It may be helpful as you think about and describe the regulation of these various alternative financial services to think about the objectives and mechanics of various bank regulations. There is a separate video in which I discuss the objectives and mechanics of bank regulation. It would be helpful to watch that video as you prepare your bank regulation presentations.